Right, so today I want to talk about this tweet by Stefan Molyneux. It kind of went viral, and it was from the 13th, so about 4 days ago now. But I thought I'd make a video about it because I remembered it when it came out, and I kind of forgot about it. Now I just remembered about it. So it goes 400,000 black slaves were brought and transported to America. 1 million white slaves were kidnapped by Muslims, 2.5 times more. Who still nags the Muslims about that? Almost no one. It's not about slavery, it's about control. And that is kind of the state we're at in society nowadays, that people don't really care about the truth, they care about their narrative. And rather than when their narrative is challenged, rightfully so, like in an example like this, they just double down. And that whenever you hear slavery, at least in the West, the first thing you think of is blacks in, the southern U.S. That's all you think of. It's the first thing you think of. And in reality, it really shouldn't be the first thing you think of. I mean, unless you're like, you were like, I mean, if you're black and you're from the U.S., maybe. If you're like from the U.S., maybe. But the entire rest of the world, the first thing you think of when you think of slavery, it should be Muslims having slaves. Every society throughout history practiced slavery for at least some point. In the West, we did it for the least, and by quite a bit for the least, because slavery still goes on today in parts of the Middle East and Africa, and yet no one's up in arms. And I believe there's just as many people enslaved nowadays as there was in the 1800s in the U.S. So again, no one's making a big point about that. And like I said, and he says here, is that talking about this, people, they'll get up on their moral high horse and they pretend they're doing the right thing, and in reality they're just virtue signaling, basically, because if they actually cared, they wouldn't lecture whites. The idea of reparations is absolutely insane. If something like that is realistic and plausible, then Muslims should be paying reparations, 2.5 times more at least. And no one's suggesting that, and suggesting that you'd be called racist, and probably rightfully so, because unless unless it was literally you or possibly your parents. But in the U.S. you have to go back, probably at least 7, 8 generations to have a descendant that was a slave, or have a descendant that was a slave owner. So the idea of you being affected by slavery it's insane, and it's stupid, because if 7 or 8 generations isn't enough, then what's enough? Like nothing. So it's a crazy idea, and it's just another testament to where we're at in society nowadays, and the double standard, and that if you're white, then people go after you from left, right, and center. If you're any other race, maybe other than Asian, depending on what it is, you're vilified, you're attacked in any way possible. But if you're another race, you're allowed to do whatever you want. You're allowed to be racist, you're allowed to do this, you're allowed to do that, and no one question it. And like I said, it's very sad that that's the way that things are, but that's the way things are. So like he says, just 400,000 slaves were brought to America. Not only that, all those slaves were captured and sold by blacks or Muslims, because whites couldn't go into Africa then. It was too dangerous. The chances of dying of some insect bite or snake bite or some airborne sickness or whatever was so high that they couldn't do it. And I mean, still to this day it's tough, and with antibiotics and stuff like that you can get around it. But that's kind of where we're at. Slavery was much larger, happened in the Muslim world and the African world on a much higher scale, and for much longer. Slavery has been going on in the Muslim world for thousands of years. It happened in the U.S. for what was maybe 100 years roughly, and people are up in arms thinking it's the worst thing ever. And obviously it was a very bad and immoral practice, but compared to what happened in other cases, it doesn't even compare. So if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.